freaking first cut. Golly. Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your first look for this week's AT&T Byron Nelson. And joining me to break it all down, it's Sia Nejad. Sia, what up?
What is going on, man? Listen, I got golf in the background here. We were talking before the show. I have a 6 for 6 in a really big tournament, and it might fall out of the cash somehow, which doesn't even seem statistically possible. But here I am actually looking forward to next week, the AT&T Byron Nelson, instead of sweating what should be like a top 50 or maybe a top 20 lineup. So here I am.
In a week where 6 of 6s were probably 5%, Sia sweating the cut line with a 6 of 6 is pretty wild. If your lineups are done, welcome to the AT&T Byron Nelson. Here it is. This event, Sia, we're going to talk about in depth, but the big thing is the new course. We're going to TPC Craig Ranch. We have never seen this on the PGA Tour schedule. We've seen it a handful of times, I believe, on the Corn Ferry Tour. But how are we going to go about our research this week with lack of information?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, we do have some tidbits of information here in terms of what the course is going to play like. I know you had seen some things that I'm sure you're going to talk about, flyovers and things of that nature. But I'll tell you what we do know so far, and obviously, Rick, you're going to add to this. There's a lot of metrics that I think apply to this tournament, and this is my opinion, that we saw in the last couple of tournaments, particularly with the long irons. I think that's going to play here. You know, we've got a par 72. I believe it's about 7,500 yards. I think we're going to see, like for me, I think I'm going to be focusing on guys off the tee in the long iron game in particular.
The official scorecard has it at 7,468. Of course, that will fluctuate shorter and longer over the course of each day. Looking at this scorecard, it's really traditional, in my opinion, Sia. It's got the 4 par 3s, the 4 par 5s, each both 9 and 18 are par 5s. So as you make the turn, you're going to get one. And as you come in to finish your rounds, you're going to get a par 5. The par 3s, three of them over 200 yards. 17 will play about 147 yards. And then we've got a couple of short par 4s that guys might be able to take advantage. I don't know. And we'll talk about how I felt about the flyover. This to me is a very, very traditional setup.
Yeah, and it's going to be gettable too. And I don't know if that's really a synonym for traditional in this particular instance, but I think, you know, the par 5s are going to be reachable. You know, some of the par 4s are longer, some of them aren't, but I think this is a pretty straightforward course that we're actually going to see a lot better scoring, let's say this week, than we're seeing right now in the tournament that's finishing.
I think that's fair. I saw the drone flyover. So there's a video on YouTube. It had like 50 views when I saw it. Hopefully it has more now, but it's literally a drone flyover of TPC Craig Ranch. It's from a couple of months ago when they started constructing the grandstands and things. So you can kind of get a feel for where everything is going to be going. And Sia, I don't see the trouble. I mean, yeah. There's kind of this like weird river type thing that kind of meanders its way through some of the holes. You can kind of see it run up the length of some fairways, but yeah, there are some holes that have tree lined fairways, but you got to be pretty far off to get into trouble. I just think these guys are going to find a lot of open spaces. You mentioned there's a couple of short par 4s. All of the par 5s are gettable. I don't see the danger. I think it's going to be something real dirty under par unless the wind blows.
Yeah, and when you consider that this is a pretty talented field relative to what we normally have in the AT&T Byron Nelson. So I think we're going to see like really, really low scores. I think we're going to see some eagles. I think we're going to see a lot of birdie streaks. You know, I've already, you know, we'll talk about this later, but you know, when you look at the field here and you look at this course and sort of the lack of resistance, it doesn't mean it's going to be super easy for everybody, by the way. I mean, there's definitely, you know, some players that excel, for example, off the tee and with those long irons, 175 to 200 plus more than the others. But with that said, the cream is going to rise to the top for sure.
Let's talk a little bit of history before we talk about this field. This event does date back to 1944. That was 77 years ago. Of course, the first was won by Byron Nelson, $2,000 for the winner's share in 1944. See, much different than the $1.4 million that first place is going to get this week.
Yeah, I'm curious what the adjustment for inflation is there, but golf has really taken a turn. I mean, honestly, the way I perceive purses like this, ever since, for me, at least with my experience, ever since Tiger sort of started with 96, 97, these purses started to gradually get really higher and higher and higher. And I think that is a product of Tiger Woods to a large degree. But the point is, yeah, it's a different ball game now. And that's a credit to the PGA Tour, and it's a credit to golf in general. This is a big sport that demands big money.
There was no event in 2020. Sung Kang is our defending champion. He won it in 2019. Aaron Wise the year prior. Billy Horschel in 2017. Sergio Garcia won it for the second time in 2016. And Stephen Bowditch won it in 2015, rounding out our most recent years. But the field looks a lot stronger this time around. Let's go through some of these notables. Bryson D Chambeau back in action, makes the cut on the number, has to fly back, has a great weekend at Quail Hollow, now gets to go to a course where I don't see much trouble off the tee. This might be kind of a hit and giggle for Bryson when he arrives in McKinney, Texas this week.
I totally agree. I think Bryson is a guy, I've already done some initial modeling, and surprise, surprise, the model that I did, Bryson's number 4. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys that sort of, I think, fit the Bryson mold that might be long off the tee, that are going to really excel here.
How about Dustin Johnson? He's a guy who is certainly long off the tee. I think there are more question marks about his game than maybe some of the other top players. We know he missed the cut at the Masters. He had an okay finish, a T13 at the RBC Heritage, and then a T48 at Valspar. So this is a stretch of golf, call it 6 tournaments in a row, that are Dustin Johnson underperforming his lofty standards. How do we view DJ heading into a week where he's going to try to get that game into form before he gets to Kiowa?
It's a really good question. I mean, for me, at least initially, I think I'm going to be more off Dustin Johnson than I am on. And I hate to get into the narratives of hey, people are just kind of warming up and they don't necessarily, quote, want to win. It's really all about the PGA Championship. I don't know that really holds true for many of the golfers. And so I think that narrative is kind of tired. But when it comes to guys like DJ, and when you consider his current form, I actually think that kind of holds true for him, that he's just not quite there yet, and he's using this tournament to kind of bridge the gap before the PGA Championship. So that's not a guy I'm going to be leaning on.
We can certainly wildly speculate about the health of Brooks Koepka, who's going to be making his debut, his first tournament since missing the cut at the Masters. I was stunned to even see him at the Masters. We know he had a procedure done on his knee. We know he wasn't 100% or probably anywhere close to it at Augusta National. But you look at the events before the Masters. T2 at the Workday. That was kind of before the procedure was done. T38 at the Genesis, then he won the Phoenix Open. I assume, and again, maybe I should not assume, Sia, that after a break like this, teeing it back up, he is closer to 100% than he was when we saw him down in Georgia.
I totally agree. And it's funny because from a DFS standpoint, which of course we'll talk about on the show tomorrow, I am so curious to see what his salary is on DraftKings, because he could potentially be a really popular guy if the price is right. I don't really think there's any reason to pivot off of Brooks Koepka if we deem him a value. And I don't know what a value is in this field. I don't exactly know what his price would be. I mean, we can speculate, but I like Brooks this week.
Also making his first start since the Masters is Jordan Spieth, the native Texan, a T3 at the Masters, the win at the Valero Texas Open the week before that, the deep run at the match play in his start before that. He played well at API, Pebble Beach, Phoenix Open, all these top 10s for Jordan Spieth. There's not much negative to say about the state of his game, especially as he goes back to Texas, in a place where he should have pretty decent success.
Totally agree. I mean, his bugaboo, at least at the beginning of this year, was off the tee game. As I look at his proximity last 36 rounds for those 200+ yard iron shots, it's not fantastic. So there are sort of chinks in the armor, if you will. But at the same time, home game might be a little overused, but he is obviously, a Texas boy. And I think he's going to do great here. It's going to be hard deciphering between him and Brooks Koepka and guys like Bryson D Chambeau for sure.
The pricing when it comes out on Monday, the odds when they come out on Monday, I think are going to be incredibly fascinating. I have no idea how to feel about Brooks Koepka in the moment, and I have no idea how to feel about Hideki Matsuyama in the moment, who is going to be teeing it up for the first time since donning a green jacket at Augusta National. We know he spent a lot of time back in Japan. He had to do the 2-week quarantine. He flies back. This is the first time we are going to see him play. How are we perceiving Hideki this week, or is it very much dictated by the numbers that come out on Monday?
I so can't wait for our DFS show tomorrow with Greg because I have no idea. Last week we speculated about pricing on some of the guys and we were largely right. But I am almost afraid to speculate about pricing now because where Hideki could go. I mean, the Masters win. How much is that valued? He's on a break. Prior to the Masters, he wasn't necessarily great for an extended period of time. So I like Hideki, but I have a feeling that he's going to be priced high enough for me not to want to put him in my lineup. And for the record, my model, which is an initial kind of thing, which might get tweaked, he's right around 20th. So, I mean, relative to what his price is probably going to be, I'm not so sure I'm going to be on Hideki.
Jon Rahm just snapped the longest made cut streak on the PGA Tour. That now goes to Joaquin Niemann. So when you have, this is always what I find interesting. You have a guy who, for 20-something events in a row has never missed a cut. He's been piling up top 10 finishes. He finally misses one. He's going to go to a course that should continue to allow him to bomb it without any regard for accuracy. Not that he's an inaccurate driver of the golf ball, but this is a place that should reward the good drive. Is this a buy low opportunity on Jon Rahm?
Again, it depends on the pricing, but in terms of perception, I think it is. I mean, first of all, we have to remember what happened on Friday afternoon. For all of those people who missed the cut, they got a really bad end of the weather. So I'm not saying you should throw away, the missed cuts, but you should consider it's almost like a case-by-case basis. With Jon Rahm, I actually don't think, and I'm not looking at the strokes gain metrics right now, Rick, but I don't think I watched it. I don't think he played that poorly. I mean, he barely missed the cut and he was dealing with the weather. I mean, this guy, just like, this week versus last week, he's going to rate out the same. He's going to be super high in anyone's model. He rates out almost, it's just kind of ridiculous, the numbers on this guy. So I think it's a great opportunity to go back to Jon Rahm.
He was 9th in the field in strokes gained off the tee through the first 2 rounds. He was a slightly positive approach player, and he was terrible around the greens and terrible on the greens. If that is the model, I think I'm willing to go back to Jon Rahm and assume he's not going to hemorrhage strokes in the short game too often. So, okay, well, Monday will be here before we know it. You, I, and Greg are going to break down the DFS board for the week, but let's take a crack at who's the favorite of this event. Like, we've got Bryson here, we have DJ here, we have Spieth here. I can't imagine Brooks is in that conversation, but you also have Jon Rahm. What do we think this is going to look like tomorrow morning?
That's a great question. I think Jon Rahm's going to remain at the top because I just don't think I can make an argument for Bryson ahead of him in spite of him making the cut and having a nice Saturday and Sunday. So I think it's going to be Jon Rahm and maybe Bryson right behind him.
I think Jordan Spieth will be shorter than what I think he should be. I just think we're getting the Jordan Spieth momentum again. I think that, I also agree. I believe Jon Rahm will be the favorite. I don't know what you want to call it, 9-1, 10-1, whatever it's going to end up being. I think Jordan Spieth will be right there along with Bryson D Chambeau. Are we going to see, although I don't know, because we can't possibly see Dustin Johnson as like the 4th favorite in this field.
Yeah, you're probably right. DJ is going to be right there with Spieth, I think. I think he's going to be 3rd or 4th. Those guys are going to be just intermingled. That I don't think the number is going to make much of a difference in the sense that one's going to be 10-1, one's going to be 12-1, and maybe one's going to be 14-1. I think Spieth will probably be in that more like that 14, 15-1, 14.
I would just roll everybody out at 12-1 and say, have at it, boys. Bet what you will, and then I'll adjust later because I'm not trying to figure these guys out beforehand. That's the way that I would handle it, but that's probably why I do not make the odds at the books, Sia.
I think that's actually a good way to handle it, to be honest with you. Let the market determine what they're going to end up at.
And then also what we'll have to do is remember, this is the final event before the PGA Championship. So if there are, you probably already missed the boat on Rory Mcelroy. His numbers have been slashed in the last 4 or 5 days. But we have to keep in mind, if any of these big names play particularly well at the Byron Nelson, you might see those odds for Kiowa shorten even further. So you kind of got to, I don't want to say it's a look ahead game, but you kind of have to think ahead to what might happen if you want to bet the PGA Championship.
Yeah, especially those guys that are maybe in that sort of like 35, 40 to 50 to 1 range, that if they do really well here, all of a sudden it might be, or win, it might be like 22 to 1 or 26 to 1 or whatever. Like there's guys like Sergio or Scotty Scheffler, guys that really have, can do well on this course or have done well at this course. If they come out in top 2 or win this thing, that their prices are going to be slashed for sure.
Like Brooks Koepka, I think is a good candidate for that. He's 18 to 1 at William Hill. If he contends or wins, he'll be down with the favorites heading into the PGA Championship. Hideki's at 25 to 1. I could see some movement there if he continues to play well. So just a couple of guys that I think we need to keep an eye on if you're wanting to get in for Kiawah.
Yeah, totally agree.
But I think that'll do it. Our first look for the AT&T Byron Nelson. Let me thank Jacob. He does all the hard work behind the scenes. We will be back on Monday with our full DFS preview as we do each and every week. But for now, let me thank Sia Nejad, who you can find on Twitter at Sia Nejad. You can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut, and we'll catch you next time.